there's a big difference between B2C and B2B, right? With a B2C, you're talking to the ultimate buyer. The marketing person is talking to the ultimate buyer. And so sometimes that works. Hey, are you interested in buying or not? And if you're not, move on. And so that's what they're trying to find. But in a B2B, you're not talking to the ultimate buyer. You are talking to an influencer of the ultimate buying decision. So the person that you're engaging with is probably not going to, even if they're the CIO or the chief, even if they're the CEO, president of the company, they're not going to make the buying decision. They're going to rely on their team, which means that you have to find a way to be brought into the conversation in a trusted manner.
Welcome to the B2B Digital Marketer Podcast, a podcast helping you to end your struggle with digital marketing, helping you to pave a new and better path to target and capture your ideal customer. Each week, we teach you how insiders and experts debunk the dreary and become engines of innovation. Now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Okay, B2B DM gang, man, I'm excited today because we're going to have a fantastic discussion. I had the opportunity to listen in on an interview that our guest had with one of my other guests, Mr. Tursky, and they had a great discussion. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, I'd love to have you on the show. And I have Richard Bliss, and today we're going to be talking about eliminating B2B social selling dysfunction. But before we get into that discussion, Richard, if you could tell the B2B DM gang just a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure, Jim. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. A little bit about myself. One thing that jumps out is you and I had this conversation. I am the father of 5 daughters. That always gets people's attention. I am the president of Bliss, which is a international consulting practice, and I'm an author of multiple books, having one just come out called Digital First Leadership. My background is in tech. For the old members of the audience, the seasoned members of the audience listening, I started my career back in as members of my team say, the late 1900s, which makes it sound like covered wagons and campfires. But I started at WordPerfect Corporation in the 80s and then moved on and throughout tech. So that's a little bit of my background. I've operated as the executive vice president of a variety of software companies over the years and now run Bliss. So that's a little bit of my background. And
it does. And it also, contextually, you're talking about so many different evolutions and iterations of the B2B marketing and social selling, let's just call it ecosystem and journey, that your insights are just tremendous.
Yeah, I've been doing it for a long time. And while my team gives me a hard time that I have to point out to them what a rolodex is. They said they saw one in a museum once, right? This new generation. But yeah, there's a lot of things that I have carried forward in my career as technology has transformed. Traditionally, we usually say if technology transforms, still the way we sell or the way we market, it stays fundamental. But lately, particularly with COVID, that has radically changed. And as you've titled this episode, there's a lot of dysfunction that has crept in because we've always done things a certain way. And now with a transformation of how we have to do that, a lot of people are struggling to break through and take advantage of this or to avoid the pitfalls and the dysfunction that you just referenced.
Well, and you referenced something, because I'm in my 50s. And so, Rolodex, absolutely. I know what that is. So when I first started, I had one. And I started thinking about that. I'm like, well, aren't we kind of, unfortunately, in a lot of ways, still working with that Rolodex mindset?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to dive into a lot of things on this call, obviously. But for example, I deal primarily with LinkedIn. And when I sit down with an executive, I work with a lot of CEOs in the tech industry. I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area. I work with a lot of marketing people and a lot of salespeople. And when I ask them why they joined LinkedIn for the very first time, the answer is almost always the same across the board: networking and to find a job. And when I asked him about that networking, it was basically to move their Rolodex online so they could keep track of everybody. And then I asked them, and this is always interesting in front of their peers. Okay, raise a hand. This is on a Zoom call. How many of you are looking for a job right now? Well, nobody raised. It's always funny, especially if I have a manager on the call. They don't raise their hand. But yet, if I go and look at their LinkedIn profile, the opening line says things like demonstrated history of working in the industry, exceeds quota on a regular basis, top. And these opening lines, I won't tell them where I got these opening lines. And I'll ask them, who's the audience? And they'll always say, oh, it's a recruiter, hiring manager. And then I drop the bombshell. I said, these are not random opening lines to LinkedIn about sections. These are yours. And that's when it starts to dawn on them. And then they'll say something like this, Jim. They'll say, oh, well, I haven't touched it in like 5 years. My response is, you don't have to tell me that. I can see that. And people forget, and this is one of the big ones, is that LinkedIn and this online digital world is where we now operate primarily. That you and I met, I went and looked up your LinkedIn and you went and looked up my LinkedIn long before we met. And that's how the new world operates, is that you don't meet somebody and then go look them up. You look them up and then you meet them. And that shift is a fundamental change that a lot of marketing people, digital marketing people, are struggling with.
Oh man, just even what you were saying right there, I started thinking about 4 or 5 different things that we can go down from a pathway perspective. And you shared with me a couple stories before we started recording that I think were pretty impactful. You shared a story about your daughter and a trade show scenario that I think we absolutely kind of sets the stage also for this dysfunction piece and getting out of that rolodex thinking and starting to be more creative and innovative so that we can stand out. But ultimately what we're talking about here is how in today's world do we appropriately, start a relationship building process. But if you can, tell your daughter's story first.
I'll tell you, I have, like I said, I have 5. So this is one of those daughters. And as a vice president of marketing, I've put on my own trade shows. I've been on stage. I've been sponsors of trade shows. And she watched me do things. For example, rather than give out little tchotchkes and little things, I used to take all of my marketing budget for a trade show and turn it into one giveaway. I mean, one year we gave away the sword of Anduil, right? Aragorn's sword, because Lord of the Rings. It's like, look, enter into our little drawing and you'll get the sword and we'll ship it to your house. I mean, versus I could have given out a bunch of little stuff. She saw what I was doing and understood that. So one day, this is just before COVID. It was the Halloween before COVID hit. She had just been hired. Her manager, her director, her VP had been doing trade shows for years. But they had fallen into this rut that they would throw on the trade show, do some sponsorship, throw a party, serve alcohol. That was their whole concept. And my daughter knew that through my own research, that just doesn't work, but it was what they had always done. So what she did, she realized that her target audience, where she was going, it was actually to a Gartner event in Orlando, and she needed to make a big splash with at the time was a fairly kind of a medium company. They didn't have a lot of presence. So because it was Halloween, and we board game at our house, she took zombie dice. You can buy it on Amazon or whatever. And she bought 200 copies of this little game called Zombie Dice. And you can roll the dice. And she recognized that several things would be going on here. One, the sound of dice hitting a tabletop, click, 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 stops people in their tracks, particularly her demographic. Males in a predominantly male industry of a certain age, 25 to 45 years old, that was her target because she knew that's who the buyer was. Sure enough, she'd roll those dice out. Bam, people would stop. She would purposely have one of them fall off the table and roll into the aisle because you know why? A guy would pick it up, walk it back, and hand it to her. Boom. They had so much success. Her VP came back and said it was the single greatest marketing event they had ever had at any trade show she had done in her entire career. And it was simply because thinking about the tactile, the sound, the touch, all of the different experiences versus just selling alcohol and maybe giving them away alcohol and they'll show up. So that was an example of right before COVID, how she thought differently. Now with COVID, so many are struggling like, okay, how do I get in front of these people if they won't walk up to my booth? And I'm seeing this major shift. So that was a long story, but it's an idea of how you have to think differently. And in today's world, you have to do it even more.
Well, and okay. And so think about that from a foundational standpoint. And she was doing something very creative and innovative when the trade shows were there. So now they've gone away, but people are still using that, how do I get them drunk, type of mindset, Rolodex mindset. And what they're doing is they're searching for what they're supposed to be doing. And, you start having scenarios where marketing is doing something that, hey, this is best of breed. Best of breed of what?
Yep. So let's talk about that, because I spend a lot of time talking to almost all my clients are enterprise customers, right? Fortune 500s, very large companies. So I'm talking to salespeople, I'm talking to executives, and I'm talking to marketing people. Those three different, this triangle that forms, my organization sits right in the middle of that triangle, because the goal of a marketing team when it comes to particularly social presence is brand awareness, brand building, or maybe even demand gen, getting people to respond, download something, take some call to action, take some action. A salesperson's job on social media, on the other hand, is to get a door opened, to actually get a person to communicate with them directly. And an executive's role on social media often is what we refer to as thought leadership, to provide the guidance and leadership. Well, those three people or organizations are looking for very different results from their efforts online, their digital efforts, particularly in social media. Brand, single engagement, or overall messaging means that you have to approach it from a very different aspect. And so one of the things we do is when we sit down and we talk, we start pointing out that how behavior in one of these teams thwarts or frustrates the other members because there's a disconnect. And that's one of the things that we point out.
Well, so it undermines, right? Because ultimately
confidence. Yeah,
absolutely. So because I think what we're trying to do from a sales perspective is we have to really go through a extremely difficult relationship nurturing process.
Yep.
And if I think about, go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to say that's a very valid point, is that marketing is looking to scale. Sales is not. They're looking to focus. And so when you have these two actions happening, there can be a disconnect. And so let's use an example. Let me throw out some data points that are going to shock your audience. So first of all, I focus on LinkedIn. So people ask me why. Well, Jim, you and I have Twitter accounts, but not everybody does. I have a TikTok account, but I've never posted anything on TikTok. Most of us have Facebook accounts if we're over a certain age, right? Talking to grandkids or grandparents talking. But we all have a LinkedIn account, 100% on LinkedIn account. So here's some things that marketing teams find shocking. Sales people find an aha moment, and this shocks almost everybody. The best performing content on LinkedIn is text only. Text only. Written words. And usually the best performing text only posts on LinkedIn are about 100 to 150 words. Marketing teams like, no. All research shows videos. Videos are number one. Except on LinkedIn, videos are last. Videos are the worst performing content on LinkedIn. And that's shocking. People are like, wait, why? Well, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of these are looking for quantity. Just keep pumping it out and getting people's attention and show up a pretty picture or video, and you'll get people to pay attention. On LinkedIn, it's completely different. LinkedIn is actively trying to get you to slow down and get people to engage and have a conversation. They reward engagement and not like engagement. They reward comments on LinkedIn, which means if I throw up a video, there's a good chance I'm not going to generate any comments from that video. Because by the time that people get done watching the video, and particularly if it's like takes it off platform, LinkedIn's not going to reward you for sending people to YouTube. LinkedIn's going to hide your video from a vast majority, more than half of your connections. Sometimes 90% of your connections will not see your content if it's a video, particularly a video link. But a conversation, text only, will cause people to stop and read. And then while they're reading, they might leave a comment, either with their thumbs on a mobile device. Well, that's shocking. And so then here's the other one. Stock photos, we call it the hero image. The LinkedIn algorithm doesn't affect that, but human behavior affects that. I see a stock image, I capture the idea, I click like, and I move on. Very Instagram, Facebook type training. LinkedIn will not reward you for that kind of behavior and content. They want you to get people to stop, full stop, and do something and enter into a conversation with you. So video's worse. Slightly above that is hero pictures of stock photos. Pictures of personal, you, your team, a customer, an event, that tends to draw comments. That tends to draw conversation because people are interested in that. But text only, so those two, text only and text only with personal pictures, far and away, 10x difference in engagement and views simply because you get rid of the picture rather than adding the picture. And that is a shock. You think marketing people want to hear about that? That all the effort they're putting into these videos and the creative and these graphics they've created on LinkedIn, it's actually thwarting and sabotaging the effort you're trying to reach your audience.
As you say that, I started even thinking about what sales is provided in order to be able to, create that relationship and hopefully get, a prospect to, the sales activity is, a lot of that material is just what you're talking about. I mean, it is, all about
generic.
Me, it's brand, It's stock, it's all of those things. And it isn't necessarily something that is going to convert.
No. And then what happens is then we have another layer on top of that. And that is these automation employee advocacy tools, which are great. We're talking about, I won't name any of them, because some of them are my clients, but these are tools that are designed for marketing to create the content centrally and then push it out to all the employees for them to share it on their social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it might be. The challenge, though, is that LinkedIn thwarts your efforts to use those automation tools because LinkedIn will not reward you for using their platform as a news feed. So they will prevent your content from being actively shown to your network if you use those automation tools. Well, marketing's trying to scale, and that's the only way that they can scale that. And so one of the things we do in my training when I'm working with marketing and sales teams is the training, oftentimes our sessions are like 90 minutes. At the very beginning of the training, let's say there's 20 people on the call, and they're marketing mix, salespeople, sometimes executives are on that call. I'll randomly have someone, I'll create a post beforehand, text only. I'll usually go to their website or their LinkedIn feed and find something that's very graphic heavy or even a video. And I'll put it in front of them at the very beginning of our training. And I'll ask for a volunteer to post this post, and it's text only. And I don't tell them why. And so I had 6 trainings this week. We did this 6 times with 6 different teams. So somebody always volunteers. If they don't, I just sit there and wait because it's like, you're paying me. I'm not going to do anything. We have the post go live, and then we have everybody on the team go and comment on it. By the end of the 90 minutes, every time, without fail, that post has 400 to 500 views in 90 minutes and shocks the marketing team that's on the call and the sales team that's on the call because there was no graphic, there was no video, there was no link. It was just some good text explaining the story rather than trying to send people somewhere else to go make them do the work. This shocks the marketing people and galvanizes salespeople, because they're realizing that they can take the content that's coming from marketing. Now it takes more work, but for a 10x increase in the number of people who are paying attention to your content, it's worth it. Do it once a week. And this is where it gets the attention of, so one of my clients, the marketing team said, can we just have a call all by ourselves? Because they started sweating because the CEO of the company was on the call. And we're demonstrating live how all of the marketing effort they've been doing is failing. And with a single little simple change, we got more engagement in a 90-minute window than any of their content had done over the last 60 days. And
You're
that shocks them.
You're a threat, man.
I am. And that's why, just so you know, I usually then will turn to the marketing team and say, here, you know what, let's just set up a free call. Because I don't want them to be in a panic. I want them to know how to do this because it'll make them more successful and their salespeople will be more successful. And overall, that's what we're all in this together, trying to figure this out.
Well, and this is part of what you talk about in regards to hacking the algorithm, right?
Yeah.
Our thought of hacking the algorithm, essentially, like you just explained, is wrong-minded. And therefore we have to take it into consideration is that we have 2 people that we have to create any type of content for. I don't want to say people, we have 2 entities that we have to create our content for. And the first one is the platform that we're playing on.
That's right. And I've had astute marketing people say right in the middle of my training, are you telling me that we need to develop a unique marketing strategy for LinkedIn? Yes. Yes. And that's a light bulb has gone off. Now they don't have muscle memory or experience doing that because they're so used to scaling with these automation tools and everything. But at least they now acknowledge that, hey, if we make some changes, if we learn some new skills, our our customers, which would be their salespeople or their executives, are going to have tremendous success. And so, yes, getting that aha moment for them to say, oh, we need to treat this differently. That's what do they say about, AA? You just got to admit that you've got a problem, right? And as soon as we got them admitting they have a problem, we are on the road to recovery.
Okay. So then there's this other problem that exists when you start talking about COVID. You have a lot of organizations that were finding things that they were doing were not delivering the results that it had once had. And then COVID hit and everybody was forced to now do things differently. And what I see, and if you look at some studies by the Content Marketing Institute, they say like for 2022, the content marketing budgets for organizations is going to increase by 60%. Prior to COVID, Apple in their podcast directory had roughly about $1.6 million $1.6 million podcasts in their directory. Now it's almost close to 3. So everybody and their mother's now doing these things. And so you have this vortex and glut of information, and you, meaning everyone, who's trying to create content, is now competing with everyone else. So it isn't about, well, just create killer content. Those days are over.
No. Yeah. And so the example I just used where I create the text only is it doesn't even matter what the text is. If you can get 10 comments on a post on LinkedIn in the first hour, you are guaranteed to get 1,000 to 2,000 views on that post in the first 24 hours. Guaranteed. So put out some text. I would challenge you, Jim, your next post that you put on LinkedIn, make it text only and just see what happens to the difference in engagement. And I would challenge your listeners, try a text only post and see what happens, because the content glut is, I got to do more video. I got to do more of this. I got to do more pictures. More. And LinkedIn's coming back. I'll give you some more details of hacking the LinkedIn algorithm. LinkedIn allows you to make a post about once every 3 to 4 hours. Now, what I mean by that is that you can post as much as you want, but the first post is going to run for about 3 to 4 hours. And any posts you make after that in the 4-hour window will be completely hidden from your network. Completely. You think you're posting them, but LinkedIn's like, no, you get one conversation at a time. We're going to track this conversation for at least the first hour, and then for the first 3 to 4 hours. After that, if you put out content, it'll shut down the first post and now promote the second post. And then after an hour, it'll measure which one's performing best. I had an executive put out a post yesterday, a client, and they've generated 20,000 views in the last 24 hours on that post. Well, now I need to go tell the marketing team and the executive, don't post anything on LinkedIn. Let this one run, because if you put something out today and some minor announcement or something, it's a Friday, it's not important, you're literally going to shut down the post that went live yesterday that's having all of this traction. And so that's a major change to think about when it comes to putting out content. One, you only get to put out, we say, about once a day maximum. The other one is that this content you're putting out needs to resonate with your audience in such a way that it drives value back. And there are different ways to do that. And that's some of the things that we talk about. But that's the biggest challenge, is that with 3 million podcasts, with all of these people now on LinkedIn, I don't know about you, but how many times do you get these unsolicited emails on LinkedIn or connection requests? Here's my segue. There's a book I have on my desk right here. I'm not going to name the author. I'm not going to name the book. But my team went through this book because it's a LinkedIn expert's guide. And they were talking about how to get in front of your prospects. And they said, send a connection request. And here it is. Fill it in with, find something personal. And then you say this. And then how you follow up with something personal here. And you do this. I saw that and I thought, I have gotten so many people who are sending me messages who have read this book and are following this, because we teach the exact opposite. Before you ever send me a connection request, which is an ask, you better have given me something first. And how do you give me something? You don't know me. Well, you give me a like on a piece of my content. You give me a comment on a piece of my content. You give me some type of validation on my content. So this is what we teach marketing and salespeople, is that first thing you want to do is find ways to begin to give to your prospects. And don't give them a solution that comes from you. That's asking. Give, and then send the connection request. And here's another secret. Every time you connect with somebody first time on LinkedIn, LinkedIn's going to act like you suddenly matched with somebody on Tinder, like you swiped right or left, whatever direction it is. My kids are always trying to remind me that. So what's going to happen for the next week is LinkedIn says, they just connected. Let's find out how valuable this connection really is. So the algorithm will take anything I create or action I take on LinkedIn and put it in front of that person I just connected with. So Jim, if you and I were to connect on LinkedIn for the first time today, anything you do over the next week is going to show up in my feed. And anything I do. So that's what we teach sales and marketing is like, look, before you can do this whole campaign to get in front of these, and then you ask for the connection request. And now marketing and you as a salesperson should have coordinated what's going to come out over the next week that we want them to make sure they see, even though we don't have to tag them on the post. The content will automatically be put in there. This is a different way, because you said it. Understand your platform, and it transforms the way that you actually do the marketing.
Yeah. So, so for me, I think we have to keep in mind all of the platforms. It doesn't matter which ones they are. I mean, you can go to Twitter and Facebook. It's the same thing. They want people to stay on the platform, and you have to make sure that you are creating the content that serves their need and their purpose. So that's an important point. And that's the number one checkbox. Am I, essentially honoring, staying on the platform for the platform that I'm on? And we're talking about LinkedIn. So is it helping LinkedIn? Not is it helping it's my client comes second. Am I helping LinkedIn? And then is my prospect, come next? And then the other thing, when I start thinking about one of the things that you just said is, so Dr. Robert Cialdini, a lot of people have followed his work about the science of persuasion. He's, just came out with a new and updated book, which adds to one of the new principle that we need to, be able to leverage in our marketing and sales activities. But many years ago, I went to his workshop at Arizona State University. And one of the many things stuck out to me, but this one thing, which for me was like that huge smack in the face. He said, we make a big mistake because we're taught early to do this. And that is, our objective should not be to try to get people to like us. He goes, that's wrongheaded. What we have to be able to do is have people to feel and see that we like them.
Oh, I like that. Oh, that's awesome.
And if you think about this, even in our own personal life, there's some people that we hang around that are just a real pain in our butt. They give us a hard time. But why do we keep hanging around them? Because we know they love and like us.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the reason why we do it, why we still hang out with them. And we don't sit there and try to get them to like us. We already just know they do. And so if I'm taking the approach of my checkbox, I got to serve LinkedIn, and I need to get my prospect to understand or feel that I like them, not try to get them to like me.
And I like what you've just said. And I'm going to ask that you send that to me after this call, because that is exactly it. Teach salespeople and marketing people to engage and give. That's what we're trying to do. Give them. I got a response today from one of our clients who found a prospect, got him on the phone. And he was a new sales rep, got him on the phone. And the guy said, I pay, what does he say? I get paid for my time, and hung up on the guy. The sales rep took that as a challenge and now started liking everything he did on LinkedIn, commenting on everything he did on LinkedIn, sending him messages, sending him connection requests, ignored. And then begrudgingly, the guy started to engage back and forth this morning. And this is a true story. I got a message this morning. He wakes up, in his inbox is a message from this prospect saying, okay, you've worn me down. Can you give me a call so that we can set up a time to chat about your product? And it's exactly right. He just unrelenting, just kept giving the guy kudos and attention. And we are human beings, and we cannot resist that, right? That's an excellent point you make with that. I love that quote. I love that.
And for me, it's just something that it's like, I always have to stop and remind myself, what is my approach? Are they seeing and feeling that? And so what that often means for me, well, I would dare to say that, we often use the 80-20 rule in a lot of different approaches of life. And that is, for me, 80% of my activity and what I do needs to really be focused in on why I like them. I mean, like even you coming on this show, I sent you a message that said, I loved your interview and what you have to share.
Yep.
right? But it's sincere. I'm not sitting here now trying to do something that's going to cause ill intent, right? And so I just need to be more mindful. And a lot of times what we do is, again, we were conditioned at a very, very early age that we're supposed to be likable. Right? No. Well, I mean, while you do need to have that, but the other thing needs to come first.
And as I look and the fact that I knew that you lived in North Carolina, right? And I brought that up in our conversation. Well, what did I just do? I communicated to you that I'd paid attention. You went to Appalachian State, which is always a fun time at the beginning of football season to see who are they going to upset this year, right? But just those tiny little nuggets of paying attention. And we use the word pay because it's exchange of value. And it's such a valid point that you're making, is that when you show them that you like them, here's another side one, and hopefully he's not listening, but I play in a basketball league and there's somebody that there's been a little bit of tension with. And I recognize that there's something I do to set him off. And that's kind of the way I play basketball. If you think of John Stockton back in the Karl Malone, John Stockton days, I'm kind of like that guy. Well, every time. So I sent him a text message this morning saying, hey, I asked him a question during the game because he was upset with something I did. So I stopped and said, hey, explain it to me. I've been playing basketball for 40 years, but I texted him this morning. Hey, thanks for taking a few seconds to give me some pointers. I always appreciate the feedback. Now I'm doing that because I appreciated the feedback, but I also know that over time, he's just not going to be able to carry that grudge forever because I'm just going to keep showing the love. And whether it's in person or whether it's online, that's the secret. So
it absolutely is.
Yeah.
So, and here's the downside of all of that. That doesn't happen fast.
That is exactly right. Again, this week, I had a client and I said, here's how you do it. I engaged with one of his prospects to show him. And he's like, oh, can I send the connection request now? I mean, that was no, take some time, maybe a week. And they're like, well, we don't have a week. Well, then you've got a problem because it takes time.
Right.
And you see it, we have so many people trying to just shortchange the length of process. Jim, let me give you a tip to some of your listeners or all your listeners. If you go and look at my LinkedIn profile right now, you will see on my name, and most people don't even notice it. There is a dot in front of my name on LinkedIn. Okay. And most people don't even notice. It's just a dot. Here's why. All of these automation tools that try to shortchange and send me the connection requests, oftentimes they just scrape my LinkedIn name right off of LinkedIn. So what do I get? And I've got them right now. Hi dot. Let's do the human thing. LinkedIn's made it harder for us to connect, but would you connect with me? Or hi dot. I saw that your profile, blah, blah, blah. Hi dot. This is a great way to weed out those who are trying to do the shortcut, who are trying to automate this process. Because one, LinkedIn's not going to reward it. And two, you're not going to get my time. And three, you're just going to piss me off if you keep doing it. And so that's one of the things that we need to be aware of to marketing people who are trying to scale and shortchange that. Salespeople who are trying to cut through the noise as quickly as possible. No, this takes time.
Okay. So what you're talking about there is what I refer to as the let's get naked disorder.
Okay. Is this still going to be a video call? I mean, are we still?
But here, think about this, right? Okay. So we talked about, I need to get them to like me. So then the thing is, if you put that also in context, is like you were talking about the executive in that example is, hey, can I send them the connection request now? That's oftentimes what we do. We'll send a connection request and say, hey, I looked at your profile and I think you would benefit from our particular product. Essentially what you're doing is saying, hey, let's get naked. You're jumping right into, a very deep ask and something that you just can't do that today. People's guard is already up.
Oh, and it's way up.
Way up. And so for me, if I'm doing something foolish like that, I'm just shooting myself in the foot. And I can't. And so that whole let's get naked disorder is something that I see it in sales presentations.
Oh, yeah.
I see it just goes on and on and on.
Well, I like that analogy as well, because there's a big difference between B2C and B2B, right? With a B2C, you're talking to the ultimate buyer. The marketing person is talking to the ultimate buyer. And so sometimes that works. Hey, are you interested in buying or not? And if you're not, move on. And so that's what they're trying to find. But in a B2B, you're not talking to the ultimate buyer. You are talking to an influencer of the ultimate buying decision. So the person that you're engaging with is probably not going to, even if they're the CIO or the chief, even if they're the CEO, president of the company, they're not going to make the buying decision. They're going to rely on their team, which means that you have to find a way to be brought into the conversation in a trusted manner. And that's the biggest difference between B2B and B2C, and why some people are struggling today, because I call them social proof points, right? For me to recommend you into the conversation of this product. And usually also the other thing in B2B, the customer's already looking for a solution, almost always. They already got in the back of their head that they're looking for something. So if you jump in and try to introduce them to something new that they're not thinking about, usually they're just like, they got so many things on their plate. Well, you've got to come in a way that they feel comfortable that if they were to introduce you to the buying decision that you won, would not diminish their reputation. And this is that shortcut you're talking about. Let's get naked, is that you are damaging your reputation as a trustworthy. If they introduce you to the next person in the buying decision, you're probably going to do the same thing to them. And that's going to look bad on them. And this is a major shift in the way people need to think about, I'm not selling to the buyer. I'm selling to the influencer over the buying decision.
Well, even add to that, say because of what I do and the connections that I have, maybe I am getting at a very high level of the organization and a heavy influencer, but there's a very big psychological difference between even B2B transactional type sales and B2B high ticket, high touch type sales. If I am taking the transactional methodology and approach and applying it to the high touch, high tech, where I need to have a relationship that's built and founded in trust, again, how many relationships last where they started with get naked?
I know a lot of people might want to experiment with that concept, but we both know that no, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't.
It doesn't work that way in dating. It doesn't work that way in business. It just doesn't work that way. So very, very excellent analogy that you're using there.
Now, those one night stands just don't last for years.
No, they don't. I think we need to shift the topic because I think this is a G-rated, PG-rated, right?
Yeah, as long as we don't drop any F-bombs or things like that. We'll
okay. No, that's not my style. So we're safe there.
Yes, but what we have done is hopefully cause people to stop and pause, because in today's world, we do, you talked about automations and things like that. We do have to have very systematic approaches that can, scale. We do have to operationalize.
Yep.
And a lot of times when we operationalize things, we put it in place and then we don't visit it and revisit it and iterate it. We just don't. It's like, well, that's taken care of. Yeah, but you're burning a bridge. Right?
Fire and forget, ghost, post and ghost. I mean, we hear all the terms. That's exactly what's happening. And LinkedIn's one of the few platforms that is actively attempting to thwart that kind of behavior. And I'll hear it all the time, that LinkedIn's a ghost town, that it's a shallow pool with no depth, because I'm talking to people who have been trying to penetrate it using these other tactics that you just talked about, these transactional tactics on social media, whether they're coming from Instagram. I spot the Instagram influencers all the time on LinkedIn because they'll have 60 hashtags and they'll tag 1,000 people. And LinkedIn will punish you if you use more than 5 hashtags. LinkedIn will punish you if you tag too many people and they don't respond. LinkedIn will punish you if you put up a link that takes them off their platform. LinkedIn will punish you if you these are all Instagram things, right? All of the behavior of Instagram, it's like they went down and said, okay, what do we hate about Instagram? Okay, we're going to punish anybody who tries to do that on our platform. So yeah, you're bringing up extremely valid points that those transactional approaches, particularly people, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs who are finding success over here on Instagram. I have people all the time come to me and say, you should be more active on Instagram. Why? Now, hang on. There is a reason why I should be, but in my market, no. My Instagram is most gardening and the latest bugs that I found on my plants. It's not, but it is a social proof point, Jim. It's still a social proof point that when the person goes to connect with me for the first time, they're going to look me up. They're going to look at my LinkedIn. Does he have a Twitter account? Yeah. I've got substantial number of. This is what I always find when somebody reaches out to me and they claim to be some type of guru and everything. Maybe on Instagram, they've got 10,000 followers. I go and look on Facebook to see what kind of posts they're putting on Facebook. And then I go on LinkedIn and I see that they're only getting 1 to 2 likes on their posts on LinkedIn. I'm like, this person is not an influencer, because the social proof points that I'm looking at are not moving beyond the one area that they focused on. And that's one of the key ingredients that marketers need to think about, is the overall ecosystem of proof points that your customers are going to look for to make sure that you really know what you're talking about.
Most definitely. Okay. So we've hit we've hit several points. And so we have, 2 organizational groups, arguably you could say a third, because here's what's happening with a lot of organizations struggling when you start talking about, client acquisition, moving to sales, and organizations left and right are adding this, revenue operations end to it. So you have all of these groups within an organization that are trying to help with, top side growth for an organization. And things have changed so much. Our approaches are archaic in many ways and need to be abandoned. But we have to wrap this up and say, okay, if I'm sitting here and I'm a B2B DM marketer, what do I need to be thinking right now?
A B2B DM marketer is going to look at LinkedIn and say, how can I slow down the volume and increase the value of, and so when I work with my clients and they want to do DM B2B on LinkedIn, what we do is we get them to have an executive create maybe they got a product launch and it's coming out, or maybe they've got a webinar or something that they want to drive a call to action to the customers. Think about it differently. It's going to be a 3-week process. Week number 1, you have one executive who's going to have a post created. They can write it. You can write it. It's text only, and it goes into the value that they believe in the product or the company. And then you get partners, customers, employees to engage with that post. Conversation, comments, back and forth. You're going to do it the next week with a different executive and a different value prop around the same idea. Maybe it's going to be the CEO, maybe it's going to be the chief technical officer, and maybe it's going to be the chief revenue officer, and then you're going to drive a conversation around that. And then the third week, you're going to drive another conversation. We have seen clients approach it from this path. That's only 3 posts that went out over a 3-week period. But because they mobilized the company and the organization around those posts, they were able to generate a 10x response to the signups, downloads, and all of the activity that marketers are traditionally looking for. And so slowing down and focusing will actually deliver a lot more results than just trying to do more.
No more spray and pray.
Yep, there's another one, spray and pray.
Oh, Richard Bliss, man, this was a fantastic conversation. How do the B2B DM gang listeners get in touch with you?
Well, they can go to Twitter, Richard Bliss. They can go to Facebook, Richard Bliss. They can go to Instagram, Richard Bliss. They can usually find me on LinkedIn and follow me there or connect with me. And then blisspointconsult.com is my website. They can look for me on Amazon as an author. I have several books out there. And so pretty much they're probably going to be able to find me any way that they want to.
Richard Bliss, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Thanks, Jim. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Go now to join the B2B DM gang in the B2B Marketer LinkedIn group, where you can connect with other B2B DM disruptors and get access to our B2B DM cheat sheets, checklist, and guides. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, please help by going to iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe. And share the show on all of your digital platforms. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. And always remember, you can automate your lead capture, but you must lure your lead.